Hi, and welcome to our service. If you're new here, you may be wondering who we are and what this church is all about. Well, the heart of the matter is this. We're a group of people doing our best to love God and love those around us. One of the ways we express this love is through worship, because our God is truly amazing. He created everything, great and small, and His love for us is incredible, powerful, and completely unconditional. We also spend time looking into His Word, the Bible, and receive practical teaching to guide us along His path in our everyday lives. But it doesn't end when the service is over. Throughout the week, we gather in groups to serve, pray, reach out to our community, and sometimes just to hang out and have fun. Life is full of challenges, and none of us are perfect. But we believe that's one of the reasons God has brought us together. We're all here to help and support each other through each step of life's journey, because nobody should have to travel alone. So thanks for joining us today. No matter who you are, we want you to know you are welcome.
Good morning, Riverside Church. So glad that you have joined us online here, and so glad that you're here to worship the Lord with us. I'll just let you know that next week also we'll have online service for our church service. So please join us once again on Facebook or on YouTube to see all that's going on. And kids, don't forget to ask your parents that there is another video for you that's available. All you have to do is sign up on the Riverside Kids page. Facebook page, and you can email the church for the information on that and how to join up with this private group. We also have something exciting happening on Monday night. We're going to call it RCB Connect. And we thought it might be fun to have a time where we can visit one another, and we can there's no set program, there's no agenda. It's just a casual time of seeing people and hearing their stories, and just, we miss some of our friends from Riverside Church, and so we just want to make sure that we're all connected together. You can go to our page, Facebook page, and you can see the information to sign up on a Zoom meeting. And that way everyone can be together. We can talk, we can have tea together or coffee together, and just get to know one another and see each other again. Next Monday, on April the 6th, we're having another prayer night. It's on Monday night, another prayer and praise night. The last one was such great success, we decided to do another one and continuing to pray for one another and to worship the Lord together. So on Monday, April 6th, at 7:30 at night, we'll have another Zoom meeting. Again, all this can be found on our Facebook page. And we're going to have a time where we worship the Lord. And we're going to pray for one another and pray for the needs of the church and pray for individuals that are asking for help. And so just check that out. Look at our Facebook page to find more information. Also, unfortunately, we have to postpone several things that are happening because of the government guidelines with coronavirus. And some of these things have to be scheduled for a later date. So please continue to check our Facebook or our website for the latest updates. And thank you so much for all that you do. And I just thank you so much that you're joining us today. God bless you.
Lost are saved, find their way at the sound of your great name. All condemned angels all around. My delight is found in knowing that you wear the victor's crown. You're my help and my defender. You're my savior and my friend. By your grace I live and breathe to worship you. At the mention of your greatness, in your name I will bow down. In your presence fear is silent, for you wear the victor's crown. Let your glory fill this temple. Let your power overflow. By your grace I live and breathe to worship you. As the lost become the found, you can never be defeated, for you wear the victor's crown. You are Jesus the Messiah. You're the hope of all the world. By your grace I live and breathe to worship you. The work was finished. You were buried in the ground, but the grave could not contain you, for you wear the victor's crown. Jesus
Riverside Church. Hope all of you are doing well. We are glad to be here this morning, glad that through technology that we can join together in worship, even though we can't physically be together because of all the restrictions and regulations. It's so nice that we can all join together through the internet and we can still worship together. You know, it's pretty interesting to have church at home and you guys are on your couches and sitting around and half of you are in your pajamas and all that. And it's kind of cool in a way. But, you know, this thing, all these restrictions have kind of come up on us pretty fast. You know, we've never probably experienced anything like this in our lifetime. And there's a lot of news headlines. There's a lot of information that goes around that we were constantly reading all day. And there was a couple headlines that I wanted to point out that I saw here. I'm going to use my phone and pull these up. So these are a few headlines that I thought were pretty interesting here during this time of coronavirus. Here's one here. The U.S. Congress just passed a stimulus package. And this headline says, Congress excited to find out what's in stimulus package they just passed. Some of you get that. Okay, so we're going to move on to some other ones. Here's one for some of you American ladies. Hallmark Channel announces 19 new coronavirus-themed movies. Yep, that'll be great. Here's another good one. Headline, family takes weekend vacation to guest room. Some of you may be experiencing that. That's a good idea. You know what? Get out of that living room, go to the guest room for a while. Let's see. Here's a good one. One more headline. Government accidentally shuts itself down with ban on non-essential business. I think that one is pretty great. So anyway, those are not obviously real headlines. They're from a satirical website. There is one more that I want to read to you, and this one actually it's kind of funny, but there's truth in it too, and that's kind of why I want to read this. Here's the headline: God to ignore quarantine and continue being everywhere. Isn't that the truth? Let me just read this to you. The CDC now recommends that everyone stay home and avoid getting out as much as possible. Despite this, reports are that God is breaking quarantine and going absolutely everywhere. Hospitals, nursing homes, prisons, wherever He is needed, God is going. He is reportedly visiting everyone and checking on everyone in this time of need and not using any amount of social distancing. God is said to be following the absolute best practices, though, and is at no risk of making people sick, but only making people better. So, you know, even in some of the humor that we can find concerning this difficult and strange time that we're all going through, there is a lot of truth in that. You know what? We may be sort of quarantined and on lockdown a little bit, but God is not, and God is still with us wherever we are. And so with that, let's move on. We got are able to continue today our parable series that we've been going through. And today we're on the parable of the unmerciful servant from Matthew 18. And this is a great parable about forgiveness. It's pretty powerful. So let's just jump in here. Matthew 18, verse 21, it says, Then Peter came up and said to him, Lord, how often will my brother sin against me, and I forgive him? As many as 7 times. Well, that's a very interesting question. I'm kind of going to just work our way through this parable and talk through it as we go. Peter is asking how many times should he forgive? Should he forgive 7 times? And maybe we're thinking, why does he say 7 times? I mean, that's kind of seems to be an arbitrary number, kind of a random number. But I think Peter thought he was being really generous when he said 7 times, that he was kind of going beyond the call of duty. You see, the Pharisees required forgiveness as evidence of personal righteousness. And they actually required that you forgive someone 2 times. That was the requirement that they had. Peter also may have been thinking about, he's hanging out with Jesus, spending time with Jesus. He may have been thinking about what turned out for us to be Matthew 5:39, when Jesus said, if someone strikes you on the right cheek, turn to him also the other cheek, which would again be 2 times of forgiveness, agreeing with what the Pharisees required. The Pharisees also said that if you wanted to go beyond what their requirement was, their interpretation of the law, then you should forgive 3 times. Wow, that's really, going beyond the call of duty, forgiving 3 times. And maybe also Peter remembered again Jesus when he said that their righteousness should exceed the righteousness of the teachers of the law and the Pharisees. So, taking all that in consideration, 2 times, 3 times, even beyond the law, that now Peter's thinking, okay, I got to go beyond that. I got to do more than that. So, hey, 7 times, man, this is a lot. And Peter probably thought he was going way above and beyond and being very spiritual when he said the number 7. So in verse 22, we go on, and Jesus' reply, he says, I do not say to you 7 times, but 70 times 7. 70 times 7. So here, I was reading through, studying for this message, and I came across this Jewish rabbi, and he had some comments about this passage and about 70 times 7, which is, again, it's kind of like, what, 70 times 7? That's kind of a random thing. What does that mean? And this rabbi, I am not an expert on Hebrew or history or any of that stuff, but anyway, this rabbi was saying that Hebrew is an alphanumeric language, which basically means that every word has a numerical value, that all the words that share the same numerical value are connected in some way and frequently have a deeper spiritual meaning. So this is what I read, that 490, 70 times 7, 490, is the numerical value of the Hebrew word tamim, and I'm probably not pronouncing it right, but tamim, which means complete, perfect, or finished. Now, forgiveness is essential for us to understand how those words apply to our lives. You see, a person's life can't be complete. We can't understand the finished work of the cross until we're able to forgive. That's essential to that. Also, 490 is the numeric value of the phrase, let your heart be perfect, which is found in 1 Kings 8:61. And our hearts obviously can't be perfected until we have forgiveness. So you can see that those numbers kind of connect and those words kind of connect with each other, give a little deeper meaning to maybe the 70 times 7. Also, a little further, I know some of you are zoning out because it's not your thing, but some of you are loving this part of it. But anyway, those of you who don't like this kind of thing, just hang on a couple more seconds and we'll go on to something else. So, all right, so also the words nativity and Bethlehem both individually add up to 490, 70 times 7. So obviously Jesus was born so that we could be forgiven. The Lord's Prayer, Bethlehem actually means house of bread, house of bread. And the Lord's Prayer says, give us this day our daily bread, and forgive us our trespasses as we forgive those who trespass against us. In communion, we partake of the broken bread, which represents the body of Christ. This is my body given for you, Luke 22:19. So, again, going back to the Lord's Prayer where it says, give us this day our daily bread, that means every day we need bread. We need bread to survive physically. And then it says, forgive us our trespasses, we forgive those who trespass against us. Again, implying this is a daily need, that we need forgiveness and we need to forgive every day on a continual basis. And obviously we can't survive spiritually without forgiveness. So anyway, all of this kind of plays into the 490, 70 times 7. But some of you, again, are really like that stuff and some don't. But basically for the rest of us, it means 70 times 7 means we have to forgive continuously. There is no end. It's unlimited forgiveness. Don't worry about how many times. Just keep on forgiving. There's no end to it. It goes on forever. We'll never fulfill the requirement of forgiveness. The law had a requirement, but Jesus came and He took everything to a higher level. He took everything to a heart level. Just like in Matthew 5:21, it says, you have heard that it was said to the people long ago, you shall not murder, and anyone who murders will be subject to judgment. But I tell you that anyone who is angry with a brother or sister will be subject to judgment. So, before in the Old Testament, we had to live by the law, and it was all about our behavior and our outward actions. But when Jesus came, it all flipped now, and it was to a higher level. It's actually to a heart level. And Jesus gives us a new heart, and the law is written on our heart, and now our desires change, and it's more about motivation and who we are inside than it is about what we're actually doing on the outside. So actually, Jesus has elevated that. So that's kind of what we're talking about right here, 70 times 7. It's not about this certain behavioral requirement of forgiveness. You have to do it this many times, but we have a new heart, and now our hearts are to forgive people all the time. And that's the way of life, is forgiveness. Anyway, verse 23, we move on. Therefore, the kingdom of heaven may be compared to a king who wished to settle accounts with his servants. When he began to settle, one was brought to him who owed 10,000 talents. Wow, that's incredible. 10,000 talents. And most of you are saying, I have no idea what that means, but it sounds like a lot. And here, this is very interesting to me, that we have to understand this passage, to understand what it's saying to us, we have to understand kind of the value of 10,000 talents. So we're going to look at that here for just a second. So the term talent doesn't mean the same, obviously, for them in biblical times that it does for us today. In the Old Testament, a talent was actually a unit of measurement for weighing things, weighing precious metals, gold or silver, and it weighed around 75 pounds, 35 kilograms. The Hebrew word for talent was kikar, It was a flat, round, gold or silver disc or a circular shaped loaf. You can actually look that up and find pictures on the internet of this object that weighed 75 pounds, 35 kilograms, that they would use as a unit of measurement. But by the Old Testament, by the New Testament, which is what we're talking about now, obviously with this parable of the talent, the value it wasn't so much a weight measurement as it was now a value of money, currency. So the talents that are spoken of in this parable and the parable of the talents was the largest unit of currency at the time. It comes from the Greek word telanton. Again, sorry, but that's what it looks like. And was equal to 6,000 drachmas or denarii. 6,000 denarii, the Greek and Roman coins. Now again, to help us to understand what that really means, I was reading through this and I came across a quote by a guy named George Buttrick. He says that the total amount of annual taxes of Judea, Idumea, Samaria, Galilee, and Perea amounted to only 800 talents. So all of those taxes, the annual taxes for all of those places, only amounted to 800 talents, and this guy owed 10,000 talents. It says, for example, 10,000 talents that were owed by this servant would come to at least 204 metric tons of silver, reflecting an astronomical sum of 60 million denarii. 60 million. So a denarii was basically 1 day's wage. So 60 million days' wages were what this guy owed the king. Again, according to Nave's Topical Bible, one who possessed at this time 5 talents of gold or silver was a multi-millionaire. 5 was a multi-millionaire. He owed 10,000. Some say that the talent in these parables would be equivalent to 20 years of wages to the common worker. 1 talent, 20 years of wages. And all this does kind of add up if we work it through. But one more thing, some scholars would say maybe a little more conservative on the estimate. They would say that it's between $1,000 to $30,000. And that's a big range. 1 talent, $1,000 to $30,000. Even at $1,000, even at the minimum, even at the lowest estimate, a talent would be $10 million today. So you can see, okay, all of that to say this. The debt that the man owed was unrepayable. There was no possibility that he would be able to repay this debt. I mean, he could work the rest of his life. He could sell everything he owned. He could do, this just an unbelievable amount of money that he owed. All right, so verse 25, it says, and since he could not pay, his master ordered him to be sold with his wife and children and all that he had, and payment to be made. So the king decided he's going to auction all this guy, his wife, his kids, everything he owns off, auction them off at the slave market, and he's going to sell them into slavery. It's punishable, of course. This is due punishment for this offense, for this debt, and what does the servant do? Verse 26. So the servant fell on his knees, imploring him, "Have patience with me, and I will pay you everything." All right, so you get this picture in your mind, right? Think about this. Here's this servant, and he's in front of the king, and he throws himself on the ground, and he's begging. Maybe he's crying. I don't know, but he's begging this, please, I know I owe you so much. I can never, please just help me to forgive me, forgive my debt. Give me another chance. I'm going to repay you. Yeah, it's kind of a joke, right? We just talked about how much money that this servant owed the king. 60 million denarii he owed him. He could work the rest of his life and never repay it. We already talked about it. So, seriously, who believed this guy is saying, I'm going to repay you. Give me a second chance, I'll repay you. There's no way. Maybe the king laughed. What are you talking about? This is totally impossible. You cannot repay me. But, verse 27, regardless of that fact, and out of pity for him, the master of that servant released him and forgave him the debt. Wow. Again, now that we totally understand the amount of debt, the value of the debt, it really makes it a little more real and hits home a little more about the amount of forgiveness or the value of this forgiveness that was granted to the servant. It says, he forgave him. What does that mean when you forgive somebody's debt? It means you cancel it. Actually, one translation uses the word, he erased his debt. He erased his debt. And you think about writing with a pencil, and you write a sentence or a word with a pencil, and you flip it over, you take that eraser, and you erase those words from the page. And it's like those words just disappear. It's like they were never there. Completely gone. And basically that's what happened with this debt. This huge, unbelievable, astronomical amount of debt was erased like it never existed. The king, what could he have done? He could have put a lot of conditions on him, requirements. He could have said, okay, you're gonna be my slave. You're gonna work. You're gonna do this. You're gonna repay me. I know you could never repay that amount of debt, but you're gonna repay me everything you can until the day you die. Your family's gonna work. Your family's gonna be my slaves. He didn't do any of that. No conditions, no requirements. Okay, fine. Erase your debt. It's gone. You are free. You are free from the burden of this debt. That is powerful. The king had compassion and the debt was erased. Put ourselves in this guy's shoes. What would we feel like if we were carrying the weight of this burden and we're begging, we're on our knees in front of the king, and the king is ready to sell us into slavery. And the king says, okay, you know what? All right, you can go free. You're free. The debt's gone. It's like it never was there. What would you feel like when you were walking out of that meeting with the king? You'd probably be in a pretty good mood, right? You would have just overwhelming sense of relief, of a weight that's been lifted off of you, of freedom, of thankfulness, right? Thankfulness. My goodness. The guy just gave you a second lease on life. It's incredible. Verse 28. What happens next, though, when that servant goes out? It says, when the same servant went out, he found one of his fellow servants who owed him 100 denarii. And seizing him, he began to choke him, saying, pay what you owe. Wow. This guy had just recently been in this meeting with the king where he had been forgiven this astronomical amount of debt. He should be walking on air. He should be skipping down the road. He should be humming and looking at the clouds and the flowers and just be thankful for life. And what does he do? He comes across somebody who owes him 100 denarii. Again, we go back to the value of denarii. Denarii was like a day's wage. So where he had been forgiven a debt of 60 million denarii, this guy owed him 100 denarii, which was like 100 days' wages. Which, okay, 100 days' wages, that's still like over 3 months worth of work. It is a decent sum of money, but in comparison, it's nothing. It's absolutely nothing. Verse 29. So his fellow servant fell down and pleaded with him, have patience with me and I will repay you. Man, does this not look like the same scene that we just saw before? This guy could be like deja vu. I was just there. I was just in this guy's position. I was the one with the debt that I could never repay. And the king, I'm bowing at the king's feet, begging for forgiveness. Here's the interesting thing about this too. The first guy, when he bowed before the king and he asked for forgiveness, he knew his debt, he could never repay it. And he said, give me a second chance and I will repay you, when he knew he could never repay him. But this guy actually could. This guy could repay the debt. This is possible. And so it's very interesting that he says, I will pay you back. That guy was forgiven a debt he could never repay. This guy here is willing to work and to pay his debt back. What happens in verse 30? He refused and went and put him in prison until he should pay the debt. Wow. Here's the interesting thing. How can he repay the debt from prison? He can't work in prison. He can't earn money in prison. So the guy, I'm thinking, this doesn't make any sense. He owes him 100 denarii. He can actually work. He can get a second job. He can live on half and give him half and have him paid back in a year or 2 years. He can actually repay this debt, but it doesn't seem to this guy that it was even really about the money, because he could have repaid him if he really wanted his money back. But it would seem to be kind of more of maybe he was trying to show his authority or his power, his control. Maybe he's just making a statement like, I'm the man. You don't mess with me. This is what happens when you mess with me. Because it doesn't make sense that he would put him in jail and not let him repay the debt. Verse 31, as we can all imagine, when his fellow servants saw what had taken place, they were greatly distressed, and they went and reported to their master all that had taken place. People were watching. People saw this. People knew the story. Of course, this first story of this incredible forgiveness probably spread around, and people knew what had already happened, and they knew this guy as they're watching him walking on the street, and they see this scene take place. as he is choking, literally choking this guy who owes him 100 denarii, and he's furious, and he tells him, no, I'm not going to give you a chance even to repay. I'm going to, put you in prison. And they were greatly distressed, as like bother them, of course, it would bother them. They went and reported to the master everything that happened. Verse 32, then his master summoned him and said to him, you wicked servant, I forgave you all that debt because you pleaded with me. And should not you have had mercy on your fellow servant as I had mercy on you? And in anger his master delivered him to the jailers until he should pay all his debt. Wow, again, as we read this and we see this play out, we could think, man, I'm sure the king's going to be furious. I mean, he just forgave this crazy debt for this guy. And then he goes out and he throws another guy in jail for what would be pocket change in comparison, a debt that he actually could have still paid. What does he say? He said, you should have shown mercy the way mercy was shown to you. And again, it's like, what happened? Because when he's leaving that meeting with the king, he should have been walking on air. He should have been skipping down the sidewalk. He should have been a second chance at life. And then he comes across this servant that owes him a small amount of money, and it's like a switch just flipped or something. It doesn't really make any sense. And obviously this guy's heart was not changed through this experience. So the king throws the first servant, into prison. The same thing. He says what he told the other servant. He's like, hey, I'm going to throw you in prison until you can repay your debt. Obviously, again, you can't repay your debt from prison, and this debt could never be paid anyway. His debt was so large he could never repay it. But as we look at this parable, a few things that I think are really important for us to pull out of it. Number one is the first servant owed a debt that was so incredibly large that it was impossible for him to repay it. And I think that's a picture of all of us. We are that first servant. And every one of us owes a debt, a sin debt, that we could never repay. There's no way we could ever be good enough. There's no way we could ever work hard enough. There's no way we could ever do anything to repay the debt that we owe. The king had compassion and mercy on the first servant when he bowed his feet, asked for forgiveness, asked his debt to be forgiven. The king forgave his debt. He erased his debt as if it never existed, no conditions. And Jesus, our Heavenly Father, does the same thing for us through what Jesus did on the cross. Our debt was so huge that we could never repay it. But when we come to Him, when we bow down and say, God, I'm throwing myself on your mercy. I can never repay this debt. There's nothing I could ever do. There's nothing that would make me good enough to be forgiven and to have a relationship with you, to be in heaven for eternity. But the King has mercy on us, and He sent His Son Jesus to die for us so that we could be forgiven. And He takes that, and not only are we forgiven, but He erases our debt. Just like He did with the servant, He erases our debt. He erases our sin like it was never there, like it never existed, and gives us a clean slate. Also, after that happens in our lives, when we receive forgiveness from God, from the Father, from our King, what are we to do with that? Again, our hearts are changed, and we become different people, and we are to walk out that same forgiveness to other people that we had just received. Because no debt that anybody owes us, no matter what they've done to us, no matter how they've hurt us, no matter anything that they could ever do to us, would be even close to as great as the debt that we had. And God forgave us our debt, and in turn, we are like God, and we forgive those who have hurt us. We are expected to live a life characterized by forgiveness. Even in Matthew 6:14 and 15, it says this, "For if you forgive other people when they sin against you, your heavenly Father will also forgive you. But if you do not forgive others their sins, your Father will not forgive your sin." Just like in the parable, He didn't forgive the second servant, and then he was thrown in jail because even though he had received forgiveness, he didn't extend forgiveness. And so then he had to go back and pay his debt. He wasn't forgiven anymore because he didn't forgive. And we must be careful. I read this quote from somebody, I don't even know who it was, but I thought it was really good. It says, "We must be careful that the minuscule debts others may owe us do not prevent us from being forgiven our enormous debts of sin." Don't let the small things that people do to us, relatively speaking, the small things, keep us from being forgiven the giant debt that we have ourselves. We are to forgive those who hurt us, mistreat us, stab us in the back, betray us. And even though these are not small things, but in comparison to what we have been forgiven, it is nothing. You know, there's so many stories that you can hear about forgiveness, powerful stories of even murder and so many horrible things that have happened to people, but somehow people found it in themselves to forgive them. And it's something that is just so incredibly powerful about that, and such a testimony of who God is and what Jesus did for us, to the world, to those around us, that we're able to forgive when so many other people would say, "Man, I could never forgive that." But when we are able to forgive, it's just a picture of what our Heavenly Father does for us. I have just 2 questions for you as we close this message. The first question is this: do you today, maybe you're there and you need forgiveness. Maybe you have never received the forgiveness that God has for you. You know, I just want to tell you that right there where you are in your living room or sitting at your kitchen table, even in your pajamas, that you can receive this forgiveness maybe for the first time. You know, that you would say, "Today I realize, that I have a huge debt, a huge debt that I could never repay, and I need God to forgive me today." It's a simple prayer. I mean, to say, "God," something like, "God, I realize today that I'm a sinner and that I could never repay this debt that I owe you, and I could never earn my way to heaven or be in a relationship with you. So God, I today receive your forgiveness. I believe Jesus died on the cross. He gave his life for me so that I could be forgiven. I receive that forgiveness today, and I want to walk out that forgiveness. I receive your grace and your mercy and your love today. Give me a new heart and a new life. I surrender my life to you." And basically that's it. If you mean that with your heart, God will forgive you that incredible debt that you have. Second question is this: do you need to forgive someone today? Maybe you're a Christian, maybe you're a believer, but someone has hurt you. Someone, again, has stabbed you in the back. Somebody has betrayed you. Somebody has lied about you. Somebody has done something that has really hurt you deeply. It could be a parent. I know a few weeks ago we talked about the parable of the prodigal son, and at the end we said maybe there are some people here who need to forgive their fathers. And there were a few people that responded to that. And maybe it's a parent that somehow you have resentment or bitterness, unforgiveness against, and you need to forgive a parent, maybe a brother or sister, maybe a friend, an ex-friend. Anyway, someone that you need to forgive. And I know that God is faithful to bring those names to your mind right now at this time. And I would just encourage you to just take a moment and to pray. God is faithful to forgive us when we ask, and He can forgive you. He can allow you to forgive them so that you can receive His forgiveness. To let go of that burden that you're carrying around, that resentment and bitterness. It can be gone today if you just give it to Jesus. I would say this: forgiveness is a process. And, even though you pray today that God help me to forgive this person, I choose to forgive this person. Tomorrow you may get up and have the same feeling that you had, before. But it's a feeling, and we have to take those thoughts captive. We have to pull those down and say, "No, I chose to forgive." And over time, as we continue to do that and continue to walk out forgiveness and continue to speak to ourselves and say, "No, I forgive," and by the power that Jesus gives me, I forgive this person, eventually those feelings will be gone. And anyway, I just want to encourage you with that. Maybe today, if you have received forgiveness from God for the first time, or if you've chosen to forgive somebody, you could let us know, write us a message or an email. It'd be great to know that the things that God has done today with all of you. So thank you guys so much. We love you. We miss all of you. We will be so glad when this is over and we don't have to preach to chairs anymore, and we can all be together and share some hugs and handshakes and some laughs. So anyway, you guys be blessed. Have a great week.
darkness. My God, that is who you are. Waymaker, miracle worker, promise keeper, light in the darkness. My God, that is